We are reading the scriptures this week that record how God intervened in the lives of his servants to protect them, to empower them, and sometimes to carry them on to greater things. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Friday. You know, there were so many recorded instances in the history of the nation of Israel where God showed up and he protected or he advanced his chosen people against their enemies. When we read the book of Ezra, we find that the nation of Israel had been held captive by the Persians for some 70 years. And now certain of them are returning to Jerusalem. The work crews are being led by Zerubbabel, who has been tasked with rebuilding the temple. Now, the temple was a beautiful but monumental structure that was quite an undertaking. Now, the current inhabitants of the area around Jerusalem did not like seeing these Jews return. They had, of course, intermarried with the enemy. They were not accepted as pure Jewish people anymore. But most of all, they had settled here and they had built their homes, tilled the land, and just became comfortable. They knew that when the temple was built, it was going to call for worship of the true and living God. You know, too many people today will drop out of church or let their relationship with God wane. They'll become cold spiritually until they're just too comfortable with this evil world to turn back to God. These people may have even taken up some of the strange gods of the neighboring lands around them. You know, that's what happens when we grow cold in our spiritual life. We let other things creep in and they take the place of God, even some false gods or idols, or perhaps just an apathy about worshiping God creeps into our cold hearts. So the enemy in the area set in to stop the building of the temple and to drive these people away. One official who opposed them was Tatnai, the governor of this region. Actually, he called for a halt of the building until he could get clarification from the king of Persia for them to continue. You know, of course, this was just a tactic to try to stall them, to slow down their work, to get them to stop building this temple. Sometimes we can get sidetracked like that way. From the work of God, sometimes he has called us to do something very specific, but if we're not careful, we'll let the enemy creep in and change our mind about the work in some way or another. His tactic was to threaten these Jews. And the governor said, "Who has commanded you to build this temple and finish this wall?" As a matter of fact, he called for a cease from the work that until he could get a letter from Darius the king to confirm their work, or perhaps to condemn their work if he could get the king to do so. But the Bible says in Ezra chapter 5 and verse 5, but, remember that word that sneaks in there when God intervenes. But the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, so that they could not make them cease till a report could go to Darius. You see, the enemy tried to halt their work and cease the rebuilding of the temple of God, but the eye of their God was upon them. You know, we may sometimes feel all alone when this world presses in or attacks us or maybe persecutes Christians. One important thing that we need to learn from this passage is even when they're in a strange land or working among the enemy, God's eye is still upon his people. I love the fact the Bible says that they told them, "We are servants of the true and living God, and we are doing what he has called us to do." I hope that we can have that kind of testimony. We're going to continue with what God has called us to, no matter what the world thinks or no matter what the world says, because even if the world tries to attack us, we know, but the eye of the Lord is upon us.